This is the Generation Report. In 1991, a sociology professor at the University of Virginia named James Davison Hunter published a book entitled Culture Wars: The Struggle to Define America. From the masthead of that title emerged language which has been nearly as ubiquitous in the past 3 decades as Cold War was in the years prior. Writing in the Wall Street Journal in 1996, Irving Kristol defined the culture wars as a profound division over what kind of country we are and what kind of people we are and what we mean by the American way of life. Before and after the results were tallied in Virginia last week, culture war was a phrase invoked many times to describe the contest. But even though the divisions described by Davison Hunter and Kristol persist, the language of the 1990s does not apply to America's political battles in 2021. A quarter century ago, America's leaders and pundits were preoccupied with what the activist Michael Lerner had coined the politics of meaning. This was the time when boomers fully assumed the mantle of leadership, and not coincidentally, politics as a whole became more moralistic, uncompromising, and inner-driven. The inner-driven aspect of politics in the 1990s was particularly distinguishing, as debates over values were often more intense than debates over policies. And this emphasis on meaning and values is characteristic of what Strauss and Howe call unraveling eras in history. One illustration of how culture wars sync with unravelings: the phrase culture war was first commonly used in America in the 1920s, another unraveling decade. But most importantly, the culture wars of the 1990s were contested, debated, and fought overwhelmingly in the culture. I grew up during that era. The arguments over religion in schools, the death penalty, gun violence, and explicit content were everywhere. From the People versus O.J. Simpson to Rush Limbaugh versus feminists to Howard Stern versus the FCC, it was a time filled with battles between prominent and opposed cultural sides holding entirely different conceptions of right and wrong. It has often been expressed that the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal makes the 90s seem like a low-stakes time looking back. And it's no wonder. When arguments over right and wrong dominate both the culture and politics, the stakes of politics are comparatively low. Now contrast that state of affairs with today's. Everything in politics today is infused with a sense of high stakes. The phrase politics of meaning has become an artifact. The dominant culture is consumed with identity issues rather than questions of right versus wrong. The media has cast its spotlight on 2 senators on the basis that the Biden administration's agenda hangs in the balance on party line votes. The Supreme Court is regularly in the news. Legislators have fled state houses. The Justice Department is suing states. States are suing the Biden administration. As for the COVID mandate, I'm sure there's litigation being drafted during this recording. And amidst all that, at a moment of growing economic turbulence, 2/3 of Americans believe the country is on the wrong track, a sentiment shared by 64% of voters in Virginia. Characterizing one election in one state as somehow reflecting a culture war in America misses the mark for many reasons. For one, it disguises the many crucial differences between the era commonly referred to as the culture wars and the present day. For another, it provides no context for what distinguishes unraveling eras in history from the crisis eras which follow them. For another, it gives a false impression as to why the political winds have shifted so dramatically over the course of this year. But most importantly, it would be impossible not to notice that in the last month, the phrase culture war has itself been weaponized. Preemptively or retrospectively singling people out who vote the wrong way, attributing their votes to unfounded concerns and malevolent prejudices, and claiming their side is fighting a culture war. All that's missing is telling over 1 million people they're on the wrong side of history. Rather than apply my own label to describe what's happening, I'll leave it to you, the listener, to come up with your own. But I know this much. What America is experiencing in 2021 is not a culture war. It's something else. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this series, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone important to you. I'm Paul Zimi Finn. May God bless America.